Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Gavinski's Tutorials. Today I'm going to do a very detailed walkthrough on Atoms by Baby Audio. So this is available for desktop and just came out recently as an AUV3 and standalone for iOS, iPad and iPhone. So I'm going to do a walkthrough of it and a very honest review of it as well. It's got some strengths and it's got some weaknesses. Now, there's a very interesting video on Baby Audio's YouTube channel. It's an interview with the developer, the main developer, a guy called Sylvan Willemsen, who's a PhD in physical modeling, the type of synthesis used here. And in that video, he talks in detail about how the physical model works, but he doesn't actually demo anything. There's no audio in that video, apart from the, recording of the interview itself. So in this video, I will take some of the insights that I gleaned from watching that a few times and my own research and, use that to help you understand the UI a bit deeper. So talk for a minute about the kind of physical modeling that this uses. So this uses a type of physical modeling called a MassSpring Network. And it's absolutely not the first synth to do that. This is old tech, this MassSpring thing. There was a synth that came out of University of Grenoble but it was developed between the 70s and the 90s, which used this. You also have, for example, the Spring Sound synth for iPad, maybe iPhone as well, I'm not sure. Developed by Christophe Duquesne, and that's $3. That is an iPad synth which uses the same basic principle. But all physical modeling instruments will be a bit different, right? Even if you take another thing that uses a MassSpring network, it'll implement in a different way. And Spring Sound, for example, it has a much more complicated UI than Atoms. So Atoms, you can see that simplicity as a strength, and it can also be a weakness in certain areas. In the video, I'll also talk about the MPE implementation in this and the limits of that. I think if you're someone who is buying this because it's an MPE synth, you should really be informed about exactly to what extent the MPE is implemented here, how robust that is. So that's another thing I'll cover in the video. So this is basically trying to model the way that bowed stringed instruments work, but it's doing it in a very kind of abstract way. So if you take a synth like, say, this Swam cello app, this is a physical model of a cello, and it's designed to sound really like a cello, and that has good aspects and bad aspects. If you want something that really sounds like a cello, you're probably going to want to grab this. But this is not really like a sort of tweakable UI for sort of playing around with in live performance, whereas Atoms is. And Atoms is also sort of taking some of those concepts and abstracting them in ways that might appeal more to people who want to really do a bit of real-time tweaking. So talk a little bit about the MassSpring Network concept. So if you want to model how a string behaves in a musical instrument, you think about a string, think about a violin, and you have the string which stretches between two boundaries, the bow near where you'd usually be playing, the bridge near where you'd usually be playing with the bow, and the nut at the other end up the top of the, I don't know, what's it called, the arm of the violin? I have no idea. So that string is stretching between those points, and it'll have, various thicknesses and tensions and so on. So one way to model that kind of behavior is to have a model where you have masses, which are here represented by these little dots, and springs, which are here represented by these lines. But you need to take this UI with a massive pinch of salt, because we have various profiles, for example, in this, and I'll talk more about these profiles in detail later. But for example, if you look here, you can see we only have dots which represent masses. Does that mean that this actual model underlying this does not have springs? No. Here we only have lines. Does that mean that this model for this profile does not use masses? Absolutely not. No. So, to be honest, I do really like the visuals on this, but take them with a massive pinch of salt. Here, for example, when you see all these triangles and squares and pentagons and everything, this is not how the model is shaped. The model will basically be, a line of masses and strings, and it's not chained up in shapes like these. This is just, eye candy, really. So we'll look at these knobs here. So chaos, this will basically introduce into the physical model some complexity, like in regard to how the masses are moving in space, and that will basically translate to more complex waveforms and detuning effects. So you may want to use the tuner here to put things back in tune. So the way all the tuning and everything works in this, it will play with things like the tension of the strings and their length and things like that, so that you get, like you do with real strings. If you have, you think about a low E on a guitar, it's much thicker than the high E. So in that particular case, the strings are the same length. It's just the thickness that is varied to change the tuning. Things like the vibrato in this basically oscillates that string thickness or tension to change between higher and lower pitches. So that's not post-processing, that's totally part of the physical model, which is quite interesting. So that's chaos. Now we can modulate that, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. We can modulate all of these. Now, order is basically applying damping to the springs, and that results in something like a low-pass filter. But it's not a post-processing low-pass filter. It is built in. It's part of how the model is done. So one interesting thing that Sylvan talked about in his video is, if we go up to the settings here, there's a thing called eco mode. So eco mode can be used to save your CPU, because this is quite an intensive app. But in eco mode, the model just works in one dimension. The masses are lined up horizontally. In the normal mode, they're in 2 dimensions, so they can move vertically as well. And that sort of gives the system a bit more slack. And so if you don't have that slack, using the chaos knob would result in a lot of very unpleasant buzzing. And that's why it doesn't work in eco mode. It's also why if I pull down this order value that I set here, you can see that there's a little dark green line that goes up to this point. And so what that is just when you bring up the chaos value, like I will pull down chaos here, but look at the order knob. So do you see that those are working in tandem? That is because when you increase the chaos amount to make it just not so buzzy, the order is automatically increased to bring out some of these very, I guess, atonal, maybe noise type high frequencies. So if you actually wanted to hear the order doing anything when the chaos is set at this level, you'd have to bring the order value up above 60. So down here, when I'm twiddling, that's not doing anything. It's only going to start doing something up here. Okay, let me bring chaos down again. I'll bring the order down. So that's lovely. And it really has a very different sound from the filter, which we'll look at in a minute. And so then here we have force. And so this is basically allowing you to control the bowing force, you know, how hard you're using the bow. And over here, we are controlling the overtones. So in the model, what this is doing is it's basically changing where in the network the bow is exciting the springs. So you can think of this as similar to, say, where you bow on a violin. If you're bowing up very close to the bridge, it gets more screechy. Then drive, this is a post-processing effect. And that's just overdrive. Sounds nice. And then here we have this filter, which is a wah-wah filter. And here you have this little thing, which will just increase the resonance. That can sound a bit rough to me sometimes, depending on the way you've got these set up. But remember, if you don't like the way it's sounding when you reduce the filter cutoff, you can always try increasing the order. And that sounds lovely. I mean, you may want those sort of harsh sounds that you occasionally get from the wah-wah filter reduced cutoff. Depends on what you're looking for. If we come down here, we can change the root note up or down 2 semitones. And here we have these profiles that I talked about earlier. So this one is just called the standard profile. If I understood Sylvan's interview correctly, this can have up to 100 masses in the model. They sort of limited it at 100 because it would just get too CPU intensive, maybe having more. So there's another model here called Alternative, and this one also has up to 100 masses. But in this one, the model is just tweaked a little bit differently. So if you think of the model, you have, a boundary at two, like think of a line, and the line is the string, okay? And you have a boundary at one end, and you've got a boundary at the other end. And so here in this model, the springs towards the right side of the model they have more tension, and the masses are smaller, and it just results in this different sonic character. And then here, this one in harmonic, I really like this one. So unfortunately, neither the manual nor the video goes into any detail about this one, apart from the fact that it has only up to 50 masses. But anyway, it's called inharmonic, and it's a bit more bell-like sounding, isn't it? And then lo-fi. This one can only have up to 25 masses, and so the result of cutting the number of masses is that you get less bandwidth. So you're getting this more lo-fi sound with less higher frequency content. So these, combined with all the other stuff, these profiles can give you a lot of variety in the sound. So I don't know, maybe this is something innovative. I'm not sure. I'm not, an expert on physical modeling, but this is certainly one of the interesting things about the app. And then you have your attack. So if we bring the attack value down, and let's just bring the release down. So now we're getting something that's a bit more like a plucked sound, right? So that would be like you're, hitting the string with the bow very abruptly. And only then, maybe doing a little bit of bowing. And then release, that is damping, and that's a part of the physical modeling as well, and that's part of the damping. It's damping on the masses. So this is a bit like air drag. Okay, and then we have movement. Let me bring the release up a little bit. And so movement is just about the bowing movement. So if we bring the depth down, which is on the left side, then we're just getting a fairly constant velocity. But if we increase that depth, it's just like the bow is sort of stopping and starting rather than a constant bowing. I'll bring that down. And then here, modulation, this is quite interesting. So it says here, creates a bit of a chorus-like effect. And in his interview, Sylvan compared it to a flanger a little bit, but it's not a post-processing effect. Instead, what this is doing is, imagine, you have a pickup, but imagine that you can actually move the pickup around in real time, then you'll get this sort of slightly flangey effect. So that's what this is doing, and when you increase the depth on the left-hand side, then you are allowing it to move further to the left and right. Just imagine your guitar pickup. You're allowing it to move further. So that's quite nice, and it's pretty interesting. I think that it's part of the physical modeling. That said, in many cases, I'd honestly rather just use an actual dedicated chorus or flanger or whatever. So Atoms doesn't have built-in effects. I don't really mind that because, as I often say on this channel, using external effects often sounds better. I've been enjoying using TFX Echo on this because this is such a clean sounding delay. So I can use that without coloring the sound of this. And it sounds beautiful. So the vibrato, is also baked in as part of the physical modeling, and it's just making like very radical real-time changes to the spring tension. So that's pretty cool. That sounds very good. And then you have this space thing here, so that's just a reverb, algorithmic reverb, I'm assuming, with just an XY for the depth and size, and it sounds nice. And then you have the output here. Now, up the top, we have this dice, so this will just randomize things completely. Now, you can see here which things can be included in the randomization. So for example, stuff like the root note and the output, those are not included. Then you can lock certain things so that they are not going to be included in the randomization. So that's it's great that it has that lock function. You know, for example, if I want to put chaos to 0, I can lock that so that it will never be included in the randomizations. And then here, this is also cool. So this will just nudge things a little bit. So you won't get big changes in any of the existing values. So you can use this when you get a patch that you know, when you get something that you basically like, but you just want tiny little variations on it, then you can use this. Now, one unfortunate thing is the lock. Unfortunately, this only applies to randomizations. I wish that you could lock this so that when you're switching presets, it would also, you know, lock certain parameters so that they're not involved in the preset, or they're not changed when you change preset. Another thing, we have undo here, but there's no redo. I find that very irritating. Let's look at the modulation. So it's got a very simple inbuilt modulation system that has a few weaknesses in my opinion, but it's got also a couple of things that are pretty cool. So one of the weaknesses is that it only contains sine and saw LFOs and then this one drift. So this drift one is pretty interesting actually. So this is a little bit like a sample and hold with a lag so that it's moving between values rather than jumping. But this is apparently actually based on some kind of physical model. I don't know what drift. Is it based on, you know, the way that waves move or something? I have no idea. Now this is very cool. This little circle, if you take this, so we're currently looking at the automation for the chaos knob. So if I like that and I want to apply it to other knobs, I can just take this and just drag it somewhere. And now that knob is set up in terms of modulation exactly the way that this one is. So that's a really nice little thing. Here we're changing the speed, or for the drift it's changing the percent. But if I change this to saw, for example, you can see here it's got a value in seconds here because hold is on, so we'll talk about that in a second. So in this just normal free mode, it can go from 0.1 Hertz to 5 Hertz. 0.1 Hertz is not very slow. I would like this to have, you know, options to go slower. Also, you can sync it, but the sync option is extremely limited. So it's got no dotted or triplet options. Super limited. One thing it does have, you can invert the LFO direction. So let's bring that up a second. If you see here, it's inverted. So this place here is now the start point, and then it's moving there. And this is just the normal way. Then here it's starting here and it's going up to here. And then we have this re-trigger mode where the LFO will restart its phase with each note. And then you have this one here, hold. And what hold will do is, if I take this off, I'll use the keyboard for a second. So if you see there, just watch the chaos knob when I press the note. So you see that line moving up to the maximum point, and then it just stays there. So that's sort of more like an envelope. And I think that's all of the things there about those. Now, MPE though, let's look at this. So this is by far the biggest weakness of Atoms, and it is a genuinely serious weakness. So this has been marketed as an MPE synth, but it's really the weakest implementation of MPE I've ever come across. I'm not kidding you. So there's two problems. The first problem is that Atom's pitch bend is limited to 1 semitone. So that's not even just a problem for MPE. If I take, say I want to, use, like here I've got step poly ARP sending out a lot of pitch bend messages. And let me just change this. So if you hear, the way that sounds, and compare it with what it should sound like. So here a synth with actually like normal sort of pitch bend abilities. We're able to get these very high and very low pitch bends, and Atoms is just completely incapable of that because it's got this semitone pitch bend limit. So that's also a problem when we want to play that with an MPE controller, because if you're normally playing, an MPE controller to play a polyphonic instrument, you'll be used to doing just like totally flexible glides, like, for example, if I press here on a normal MPE instrument, I'd be able to glide all the way up to, this value here. And you just can't do that with Atoms, and it's incredibly frustrating if you're used to more robust MPE implementations. But that's not even the only weakness of the MPE in Atoms. So the other problem is that Atoms, if we press MPE here, it will only actually allow us to assign MPE pressure. But if you look at, a good MPE synth, like let's take, say, Rolly's Equator 2 or something. Is there even a 3 now? I can't remember. You take something like that, you can assign pressure, you can do slides vertically on notes. That's often mapped to filter cutoff. Then you can, control the VCA directly, using the pressure of your finger. You can't do that in Atoms. So that means you can't, manually just fade in the attack of and every note per note using your finger pressure. In this, it's very frustrating. In a synth like Equator, you could sometimes use note off messages to, create these little like plingy sounds and stuff that can really sound great. And you just can't do that here. And what's even more annoying for me is the filter cutoff in this is actually, so here I'm using my C-board to try and play this. But every time I do a slide up the note on the C-board, it's like hardwired here to change the filter cutoff with CC74, but it's not actually an MPE implementation of that. So if I try and play 2 notes and I try to adjust the filter per note, it's just, well, you can hear what it sounds like. It doesn't sound good. So this is really broken, in my opinion, the MPE implementation. And I did contact Sylvan, the developer, and I asked him, do you think you can fix this? And he said, well, it is like number 1 priority for a future version of the app. And I asked, well, will that be a free update or not for existing users? And he just doesn't know, will that be free or will it be paid? That's up to Baby Audio. I personally would really hope that it is a free update, because I feel that this was marketed as an MPE synth and it's really, really weak in the MPE area. So I do feel that that is something that people should not really have to pay for a new version to get. So hopefully that will be free. I really hope it is. Now, let's just look and see, is there anything else? Oh, yeah. So the presets, there's something I'd like to see here. So one good thing is that it does allow you to export your user presets, and you can also import packs. But the problem is that the user bank does not allow you to make any kind of subfolders. So if you look at the factory presets, it does have a search system, which is great. I really appreciate that. So instead of using like subcategories, you just, all the ambient sort of style presets have the word ambient in them, and, bass ones have bass in them. But the problem with the user folder not having any subfolders is that, let's say you're an actual sound designer that wants to bring out some packs for this. When you export, it will create a special kind of file that Atoms can recognize as a pack, but it will put all of your user presets into it, and that may not be what you want. Really you would want the ability to choose which presets get exported. There's also no ability to rename presets here, which I personally found a bit inconvenient. But I do like that it's got this random dice, and you've got this delete thing here. Another thing, another thing I should mention before moving on is you can also switch here to mod wheel. Excuse me. So if we choose mod, then when we click on one of these things to adjust our automation, then we'll get a mod option as well, where we can map that thing to the mod wheel. And there's another thing actually that I forgot to mention, which is actually really cool. So let's say we assign something here to modulate this. Let's assign LFO. Here we can drag to adjust the start and end point of that. Now, when I first got this, I was very confused by how this worked. It's just a bit different, but it's actually very good. But really, like, it's the sort of thing that I think would have confused quite a few people, because when you just first get this and you're just playing in here and you're sort of dragging around, this thing's moving around, and then you have this and you're sort of like, oh, don't really know what's going on here. I didn't really know how to interact with it. So it's the kind of thing that should really be there in the manual. So basically, you just take this end, and if you pull down, that will reduce the value. And if you push up, that will increase the value. And the same for the start of it. So yeah, for people who are used to the way knobs normally work on iOS, this can be confusing, but it's actually very good. It's very good how that's done. So yeah, so I won't recap all of the points that I've made in this video about what I like and don't like about this. There is certainly a lot that I like. I did realize one thing that I didn't mention is that, it's a pity that here, for things like movement, modulation, and vibrato, you can't actually use LFOs to modulate those. But of course, you can use external LFOs. Another thing is that if we look at the speed for things like movement here, it only goes down to 0.5 hertz, and it's the same for this modulation one and this vibrato one. I don't really find that low enough. So these, none of the values in these go very low or very high. The ranges are quite limited, and I don't know if that is just done to make it a bit easier to dial things in on the knobs, or if it's something about the way that the physical model works, where there might be problems with doing things more slowly or more quickly. I really don't know. So I really love physical modeling, and I really do enjoy putting a bit of MIDI into this and tweaking around with it. But if I wanted to if I really wanted a kind of MPE experience, I would definitely not use Atoms, because the MPE is so limited that it will be frustrating for anybody who is used to more robust systems. So I do enjoy this, but I'm really let down by the MPE. There's a lot of room for improvement there, and I do genuinely hope that that comes as a free update. I do think anybody who has bought this app already deserves to have a great MPE experience with it. And even, as I said earlier, even if you're not using MPE, you still may find the 1 semitone pitch bend limit very limiting if you're the sort of person who likes to do, even sequenced pitch bent bass lines and lead lines and things like that. 1 semitone is very, very little. It only really allows you to do a little bit of, vibrato with your finger basically on an MPE keyboard. That's it. No real pitch glides. All right, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please smash the like. A lot of time actually went into formulating my thoughts on this. There was a lot of time spent, learning about how the physical model worked and stuff. And if you really appreciate my work, do remember that you'll always find in the pinned comment of my YouTube videos various ways to support me. Some that cost you no money, like using affiliate links to buy plugins on Plugin Boutique if you use desktop, and other stuff like my Patreon, where I regularly have giveaways, including for desktop apps, as well as exclusive videos. So, thank you to everyone who supports me in any of these ways. I really appreciate you. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers, guys.